You are watching a movie of a PowerPoint slideshow on the history of the British colonies in North America. As you watch the movie, I will be giving you the information that you need to answer the questions on your note sheet. The controls for the movie will show up at the bottom of the movie window. If you need time to write the answers on your sheet, press pause, like I'm doing now. You can use the slider bar to go back over parts of the movie that you need to have repeated. Very simple. As you can see, the bar disappears when you don't have your cursor on it. It will reappear when you do put the cursor on it, so you should be fine. Volume is over here to make it louder or softer as you need. Pay attention, fill out your note sheet. New England Colonies, Station Number 4, History and Politics. The Church of England. The Catholic Church was split during the Reformation. People who were protesting over the power of the Pope created their own Christian church, the Protestants. The official Protestant church in England was called the, cleverly, Church of England. The Pilgrims, also known as separatists, were people who were upset with the Church of England and wanted to separate from it. Pilgrims, or separatists, were treated very badly by the English government because they were different, so they left. Now, a couple of words here. The Protestant church was protesting the power of the Catholic Church. Pilgrims were called separatists because they wanted to separate from the Church of England. This diagram here shows, kind of graphically, how this looked. The original Catholic Church was going on, that's down here. The Protestants separated from the Catholic Church in something called the Reformation, or they reformed the Catholic Church, and they were called Protestants because they were protesting. The official Protestant church in England was the Church of England. The Pilgrims, separatists, did not like the way the Protestant church was run in England. They wanted it to be more strict, right? And wanted to separate from it. The Puritans is another off branch of the Church of England. They didn't want to leave the Church of England, but they did want to purify it, make it more pure. Both of these groups eventually left England to get religious freedom in America. By now, you should have answered questions number 1 and number 2 on your note sheet. If you need to go back, use the controls at the bottom of the movie window and repeat what you just heard. The Pilgrims, separatists, left England to find religious freedom. They originally moved to Holland, but did not like the Dutch influence and decided to sail to the Virginia colony in America. This is a painting of the Pilgrims leaving Holland. These are the ones that were staying behind, and you can see they're praying for these few who are in a small rowboat who will be going out to another ship that would actually take them across the Atlantic. Ironically enough, the Pilgrims from Holland, the ship that they were in leaked so badly that they all had to crowd in the ship from England, which was called the Mayflower. Now, I'd like to add this. Holland, where the Pilgrims were trying to live, was a very tolerant nation. Their colony of New Netherlands was also very tolerant, and if you haven't heard about New Netherlands yet, you haven't done the Middle Colony Station. The Pilgrims living in Holland were allowed to practice their religion freely. But ironically enough, the Pilgrims left Holland because the Pilgrims were not tolerant of the other religions that were allowed in Holland at that time. Kind of a little hypocritical. This is a movie of a replica of the Mayflower sailing a few years ago. The real Mayflower was broken up and sold for scrap hundreds of years ago. This is a complete replica under sail. Okay? Now, what you're going to need to do is, while you're watching the movie, you need to come up with two questions about what the journey the Pilgrims took, what that would be like in a boat like the Mayflower. Here's some facts about the Mayflower. The journey took 98 days. There was 135 people on that boat, and the boat was only 90 feet long. The movie is going to play now. The following is a reading that describes Nathaniel Morton's chronicle or diary. Nathaniel Morton was one of the original Pilgrims on the Mayflower. Please listen and read along with what he wrote down in his diary. Now being past the vast ocean, and a sea of troubles before them in expectations, they had now no friends to welcome them, no inns, which are hotel-like things or places to rest, to entertain or refresh them, no houses, much less towns, to repair unto, to seek for succor, which is an old-fashioned word for help or comfort. And for the season, it was winter, and they that know the winters of the country know them to be sharp and violent, subject to cruel and fierce storms, dangerous to travel to known places, much more to search unknown coasts. Besides, what could they see but a hideous and desolate, empty or unfriendly, wilderness full of wild beasts and wild men? Now, the words that were in parentheses were synonyms for words that Nathaniel used that were a little bit hard or a little bit out of touch with our modern things, our modern language. Also, he was using Middle English, so at the end when he is spelling wild with an E, that's the way they spelled things back then. Now, I need you to reread this, okay, and replay it as many times as you need to, and you have the article right in, or the diary part right in front of you. You're going to need to list 4 problems faced by Nathaniel and the Pilgrims that, and this is the important part, that come from his chronicle, his diary, from the reading. Don't just make stuff up. You can do that now. The following is a video clip that outlines what happened to the Pilgrims after their ship, the Mayflower, left them alone in America. How did they get along? How did they interact with the Native Americans around them? How did they build their houses? It's kind of interesting.
10 years after Ralph arrives in Jamestown, another group of English settlers lands in North America. They come ashore on a deserted beach 450 miles up the coast from Jamestown and call the place Plymouth, after the English port they sailed from. These are a different breed of settler, a group of religious dissidents with faith at the center of their lives. They made the dangerous Atlantic crossing seeking religious freedom in the New World. 24-year-old apprentice printer Edward Winslow arrives with a group of religious sectarians on a boat called the Mayflower. By April 1621, their settlement is taking shape. The Mayflower returns to England. The Pilgrims are on their own in an unknown land.
A great hope and inward zeal we had of laying some great foundation for the propagating and advancing the gospel of the kingdom of Christ in those remote parts of the world.
There are 19 families, goats, chickens, pigs, and dogs. They have spinning wheels, chairs, books, guns, and no way home.
If you create this environment as a land of opportunity, then you're going to attract those type of people who want to take that risk, who want to take that gamble, and who believe in a better life.
They were heading for the Hudson River, but they've landed 200 miles further north at the beginning of winter. They have arrived in the middle of a mini ice age, temperatures 2 degrees colder than today. Winters are longer, growing seasons shorter. The soil is poor, little grows, food supplies run low. In the first 3 months, more than half the pilgrims die. William Bradford is the governor of a community soon in desperate trouble.
It pleased God to visit us with death daily. Disease was everywhere. The living were scarcely able to bury the dead. They died sometimes 2 or 3 a day. Of 100 and odd persons, scarce 50 remained.
At times, only 6 are fit enough to continue building their shelters. Susanna White's husband dies that first winter. Edward Winslow's wife perishes a month after. Within weeks, White and Winslow marry. They'll have 5 children. Today, more than 10% of all Americans can trace their ancestry back to the Mayflower. For a time, Plymouth provides the sanctuary they sought.
Edward! Edward! Edward, people, look over there!
But like Jamestown, there were others here first. April 1621. The Pilgrims have been in the New World for 5 months. Barely half survived the first winter. But they're not the first Europeans to arrive on this coast. 5 years before, European ships brought light-skinned people and plague. Almost 9 out of 10 of the local people are wiped out. The Pokanoket people don't need enemies. They make peace with the Pilgrims. They teach the English how to grow crops in sandy soil using fish for fertilizer. But they want something in return. They have a common enemy, a rival tribe, and the English have powerful weapons. The Pilgrims aren't soldiers, but in the New World, they have to fight to survive. On August 14th, 1621, Pilgrims and Pokanoket, shoulder to shoulder, will launch a surprise attack that will seal their future in this new land.
It was resolved to send 14 men, well armed, and to fall upon them in the night. The captain gave charge, let none pass out.
The rival tribe doesn't know what hit them. Surrounded, they have no answer for English firepower. Pokanoket and Pilgrims find common ground and a chance to survive. Two unlikely allies, a partnership all too rare in North America.
We have found the Indians very faithful in their covenant of peace with us. They are people without any religion or knowledge of any god, yet very trusty, quick of apprehension, ripe-witted, and just.
Their victory brings a period of peace to the colony. Their friendship is celebrated in a feast. In time, it will become known as Thanksgiving.
Democracy is ruled by the people. The regular people make their own laws and rules that they will live by. This painting is of the moment that the Mayflower Compact was signed on the Mayflower when it was anchored off of Cape Cod in what is now New England. Because they were not in Virginia, where the English king had already set up the laws and rules, the Pilgrims decided to set up their own laws before leaving the Mayflower. All the colonists signed this list of laws that was called the Mayflower Compact, or agreement. A compact and an agreement are the same thing. This is the text from the actual Mayflower Compact. It is full of lawyer talk, like hereunto and undertaken and things like that. Don't let that confuse you. The basic ideas are there. Please listen. In the name of God, amen. We whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our sovereign Lord King James, ... There was about 20 miles of stuff about King James in there, about how awesome he was, which they didn't believe because they left, but I'm not going to get into that now. Back to the text. Having undertaken for the glory of God and advancements of the Christian faith and honor of our king and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia, which they missed, do by these presents, solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one another, covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, lawyer word, and by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time, as shall be thought most, meet and covenant for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. Lawyers never use periods. My God, that was a huge run-on sentence. Anyway, last one. In witness whereof, we hereunto subscribe our names at Cape Cod, the 11th of November, in the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord King James, 1620. The Pilgrim leaders wanted this to be a legal and official document because some of the non-Pilgrim colonists who were on the Mayflower were talking about the fact that they were not in Virginia, there were no laws once they got off the ship, and that they could do whatever they wanted. The Pilgrim leaders were horrified by that and made sure that no one left the boat until they had signed this agreement of the laws, called the Mayflower Compact. Now, how is that democracy? Once established in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, religion became the center of everything in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Hampshire. The original settlers at Plymouth were the Pilgrims, who were so unhappy with the Church of England that they wanted to separate from it. Later settlers that came were called Puritans. Puritans are people who also were unhappy with the Church of England, but only wanted to purify it by getting rid of all the Catholic influences. Pilgrims and Puritans both settled in New England. They both want religious freedom. The only big difference between them is that Pilgrims wanted to separate completely from the Church of England and start their own religion, where Puritans didn't want to leave the Church of England. They wanted to stay, but they wanted it to be more pure, to be more strict and get away from, again, that Catholic influence. Democracy at the town hall meetings. Democracy is ruled by the people, where the people get together and make their own rules and laws that they will have to follow. Because it took 6 to 8 months to ask a question and receive an answer from the government in England, New Englanders had to find a faster way of making decisions. Case in point, should we attack the Indians that are building a village next to us? Should we be friends with them? Those are things you need to be able to answer fairly quickly. Town hall meetings. A town hall meeting is where every voter in the town, in this case it was only white men, would gather together, discuss whatever issues they had in the town, and then vote on how they were going to solve those problems. The following is a movie from a teacher explaining about town hall meetings. He gets into direct democracy and representative democracy and that kind of thing. We don't have to worry about this. Town hall meetings were direct democracy. The people who had to live with those laws made their own laws directly. Here is the movie.
Town hall meetings were basically an example of direct democracy within the colonies. When the Europeans come over, they brought with them these ideas about democracy. The first one established that was a direct democracy, or example of one, was town hall meetings in New England. People would come together in a building and they would vote. Each individual person would vote on a law. Now, women were not given the right to vote. Well, it was somewhat undemocratic then, but over time, throughout U.S. history, we're going to see that women will get a chance to vote. Men mostly voted in these town hall meetings, voted on things like taxes. The taxes that were collected, what would they be used for? And in town hall meetings, we use quotes by Thomas Jefferson, where he says that the wisest invention ever devised by the wit of man for the perfect exercise of self-government. was the preservation of the New England town meetings. And he believed that these town meetings were a promising step toward genuine self-government, where the people get to govern over themselves directly, not indirectly, as in the Virginia House of Burgesses, like in Jamestown, Virginia. The best school of political liberty the world ever saw was the New England town meetings, attributed to Thomas Jefferson. As an example, we look to the left over here. This is an example of what we're talking about when we say direct democracy or town meetings. People come together, every individual within the old schoolhouse or church, wherever they're holding these town meetings, vote on every bill, vote on every issue individually and directly. That's what we call a direct democracy. And that's exactly what a town hall meeting was. That type of direct democracy over here on the left.
The ethnic makeup of the New England colonies. Almost everyone in the New England colonies was English. Very, very few slaves lived in New England because there was no need for the extra farm labor. Hint for your question that you have to answer. Free Africans that were in New England became sailors on ships. Being a sailor was unbelievably hard and dangerous work, but on the ship, they were treated equally. It's one of the only places at that time period where a person who was not white could be treated equally with a white person, as long as you did your job well. Unlike what happened on shore, where everyone was judged by the color of their skin. Now, you should have all the questions filled out on your note sheet. Study all of those answers, and when you are ready, see Mr. Deserto for the quiz on this station. Please do this quickly. The longer you wait, the more you forget. Thank you.